We're going to crack on now with the future of US biofuels, navigating policy, market, technological and cost challenges to secure opportunities in the gas tank and beyond. And to take us through this panel, delighted to welcome to the stage the Technical Director of Market Development for Growth Energy, Reid Wagner. Reid, please. Come on up, folks.
All right. Made it up to the stage in order. It's almost like we rehearsed it. It's great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you to the event organizers for the second BioInnovations Midwest for another great program. We have a wonderful panel of esteemed guests covering all facets of biofuels to talk about the future, what we're looking at short-term, long-term, some of the details. We can get in the weeds a little bit. We only have 30 minutes, but I think to kick things off, because this is a networking conference, we want to hear from our great panelists, and then I'll give my quick introduction, and then you can stop listening to me. So my name is Reid Wagner, and I am the Technical Director of Growth Energy. Growth Energy is the nation's largest biofuels association, representing just under 100 ethanol plants across the country and over 130 associate member businesses that work to keep the ethanol industry thriving and the agricultural sector booming as well. So I'm going to kick it over to my esteemed panelists, starting with Dawn on the end, for a quick introduction of who you are, your organization, and your thoughts on, our topic today.
Thanks, Reid. Great to be here. Good morning, everyone. My name's Dawn Caldwell. My husband and I farm and ranch near Edgar, both sides of the Kansas-Nebraska state line. So I appreciate everything at this conference from the perspective of a food and product producer, an ag producer. Also, I'm executive director at Renewable Fuels Nebraska. We represent Nebraska's ethanol plants. There are 24 of them in our state. And then the businesses and industries that work alongside them and help them be successful. We work on policy primarily at the state level and regulations. Additionally, support our friends at the federal level, like where Reid works. I told Reid I was going to take just a minute here. I think it's really important for all of us to think about why we're doing what we're doing. And I hope you all are too. And in Nebraska, and for me at Renewable Fuels Nebraska, I'm really proud to represent what I consider or call, and what we fondly call in Nebraska, our golden triangle. So we don't have oil, we don't have, not much anyway. We don't have as robust of tourism as some states, but we do have corn, we have cattle, and we have ethanol. And I get to represent the people in all three of those pieces of our triangle, and they all work together very cohesively, making food and fuel and keeping our rural economies particularly healthy. So that's my why to show up, and I look forward to visiting about all the good topics today.
Thank you, Dawn. It's awesome to see somebody touching all three of those components, especially in Nebraska with our cyclic sustainable system with biofuels and the way it robustly supports our agricultural sector. Thanks for that why. Now we're going to kick over to Jacki, if you want to kick things off.
Good morning. My name's Jacki Fee. I am born and raised in Nebraska. I grew up about 30 miles from here in a small town called Valley. I have been working as the Renewable Fuels Regulatory Advisor at Cargill. I've been with Cargill now for 31 years, and I was lucky enough to be one of the few people that started up the plant in Blair, Nebraska, which is one of the largest biorefineries, and I'm very happy to work there. I also would like to mention, I think my why, I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, in that I'm a highly technical person. I have a degree in chemistry, and I like to work in the regulatory space and also in the specifications world to try to make things a little bit easier to use our products and to facilitate commerce where we can from a regulatory and technical aspect.
Thank you, Jacki. If there's anything or anybody at this conference that's as close to being an encyclopedia for ethanol, it is Jacki Fee. Please find her if you have any questions in the weeds. Senator Dungan, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. My name is George Dungan, and I'm a state senator here in Nebraska. I represent Legislative District 26, which is northeast Lincoln. So I live about an hour south of here, southwest. Drove in here this morning through all the construction that hopefully none of you had to worry about. I'll admit, I am probably the least educated person in this room about biofuels. But that leads me to my why. So I was born and raised in Lincoln, and by way of background, I'm actually a trial attorney. But I was elected into the state legislature back in 2022. And right after I got elected, my uncle, who's a pilot, called me and was like, well, you got to do something about sustainable aviation fuel. And I was like, what's sustainable aviation fuel? And I dove down a rabbit hole and have, I think, truly become such a big advocate for SAF. And here in Nebraska, obviously, ethanol has been one of the major backbones of our agroeconomy, and we've seen some really huge advancements in biofuels. But when I got into the legislature, I started talking about SAF with a lot of my colleagues and was consistently met with the question, what is SAF? And so over the last 2 or 3 years that I've been in the legislature, it's been one of the things that I've really advocated for. And I've become a real passionate supporter of sustainable aviation fuel, knowing that obviously across the country it's important. And then here in Nebraska, we really, I think, stand a chance to be at the forefront of the innovation of the production of sustainable aviation fuel, because it checks all the boxes, whether it's supporting our agricultural economy, creating jobs, creating a green future. I think it checks all of those boxes for me. So I've brought some legislation on sustainable aviation fuel, and I've done everything I can to be a supporter of that sort of innovation in the biofuels industry, and am very happy to be here today to talk a little bit about Nebraska policy and really to learn from the experts in the area. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. I mean, you sell yourself short a little bit. It's been really cool to watch SAF become a key topic on the debate floor in the Nebraska unicameral, and I look forward to when you can announce you also have your pilot's license and you've flown your first flight on SAF too. So I think we're going to start with the policy piece, so our first, and our long title, our first item after our colon there. We're going to start with just, Don and I had spent a week together on the Hill last week talking about top-line ethanol issues, advocating for our needs. So I think we're going to start there with you, Don, just talking about what are the top few issues that the ethanol industry is focusing on, maybe some quick status updates on those, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, glad to report back, Reid. So if I were to rank numbers 1, 2, and 3 from the perspective of our Nebraska ethanol plants, it would be year-round E15, year-round E15 followed by year-round E15. We do have other issues we're talking about, whether it's RFS, Renewable Fuel Standard, what those gallons are going to look like, what our next set is going to look like. But for the most part, if we could just get year-round E15 nationwide, we could eliminate, we just learned this last week, $4 to $6 billion of expense at the federal level. Why wouldn't we do that? So the reason that happens is because we wait until the 11th hour, 59th minute every year for our EPA to conclude their assessments to decide that, yes, we should have E15 in the summertime. Currently, retailers have to put a bag over a pump, or they have to put a big scary sticker on there, or whatever they have to do. They're not supposed to sell E15 in the summertime from May through September, or June 1 through September 15th. So EPA then says it's okay. And the refiners then know a little bit too late what they can put in the pipeline to come north to supply our fuel stations. It's not fair to those refiners. It's not fair to the retailers to be uncertain up until that very moment. And then EPA has to reassess and reallow that every month through the rest of the summer. Let's eliminate that. Let's create more surety for the farmers and ranchers. We had some corn folks on the stage here yesterday. There are not going to be very many new pickups sold in corn country this year. They're losing approximately 80 cents per bushel of every bushel produced. That's a big loss. That's a hit to rural banks. That's a hit to Main Street in rural America. That's a hit to Husker football because they can't buy all the concessions when they go there, whatever it is, So that's our number one priority, Reid. Excuse me. And then there are other things, of course. We want to open up some trade, and get some corn out of supply right now. And we want to be able to have the new products. And in Nebraska, that carbon pipeline, that carbon sequestration pipeline that Tallgrass has done such a stellar job of implementing, goes into effect here in October. Late September, October, they're starting from west to east. So we're going to start capturing, compressing, and sequestering carbon dioxide, and that opens up a whole new level of opportunity for utilization and offtake projects for that carbon dioxide.
Perfect. Well said. And I appreciate being able to vent a little bit, But I think you've got your nose right in the right direction on a lot of this stuff is to strengthen the agricultural economy. I mean, we talked about those savings that you saw from the CBO, for the E15, the year-round E15 bill. We're talking about building markets for farmers. We're not talking about utilizing federal assistance long-term. So that's a wonderful, wonderful path to take. And, as we look to the future, and I guess before we jump ahead, does anybody else have anything to add on any of our federal issues? Okay, perfect. I think you said it well, Don. As we look toward the future in 45Z, I guess I'll kind of jump around a little bit here. You had mentioned the carbon pipeline, and there've been some chats, and this is kind of maybe something that's in the periphery, but needs to be brought forward. What are we waiting on for 45Z? What are the things that we need to see? Because that could, that spurs that innovation and that use of carbon dioxide, for instance, that some of these audience participants are interested in. What are we waiting as an industry on 45Z, and what kind of wins or challenges do we have?
Well, once again, we're waiting for our friends at the federal government, Department of Treasury. I'm going to let Jacki answer specifically because she lives that day to day. And so I'm going to let her talk about that transaction that has to take place.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we're waiting on, and if we're going to get into the weeds a little bit in the model, is what is going to happen with the ILUC. Are we going to count it? Are we not going to count it? What do we do? I mean, the tax year, the tax filings are coming up soon. We need to have some clarity. And as Don has said, we are in this wait and see mode. So we're constantly running the models over and over again with all these scenarios because we don't know exactly what's going to happen and what we're going to need to have in all of our calculations to meet or not meet the threshold to claim the tax credits.
Thank you. And I guess for a last policy point, Don, you had made a mention of it. We'll keep the view 1,000 foot. Everybody's favorite three-letter acronym in the ethanol industry, the RFS. What are some of the good things we've seen out of this administration, and how does that help bolster, our markets for ag producers and for ethanol?
Well, first and foremost, we saw an increase in gallons. So this may be one of the first times we actually get to produce and claim that full 15 billion gallons of traditional ethanol. We've had that number floating around out there for a number of years, and we've never actually met it for various different reasons, whether it was small refinery exemptions or whatever it may have been. And I think we're ever closer. Same with renewable diesel, we'll use that. Biodiesel, they are two different things in that regard. I just want to circle back. Reid, you brought up 45Z. When we saw the big, beautiful bill, whether you call it that or not, in your daily life, it was a scramble to hang on to that one thing, 45Z. There were very few things that were retained from the previous administration for the bioeconomy and incentivization. And 45Z was the one that we were able to keep. And while we decreased the sustainable aviation fuel credit from $1.75 to $1, that was one of the bummer things in there. It's still something. And that brought parity for the biodiesel, renewable diesel folks. They were the ones asking for that parity. Let's keep things a little more equal on the playing field. So 1, retention, 2, looking forward, more robust gallons. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've provided this moderator a great segue into talking about the state level or the role that state level policy has in bringing these opportunities to light, things like SAF and renewable chemicals. So Senator Dungan, I'd love if you'd be able to comment on what you feel the role of state level policy is in kind of this landscape, and then of course touch on your bill too.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the sort of information we're able to get here about the federal level, because so much of what I do at the state level is try to provide certainty, right? We've heard about that already here today, and everybody in the room knows when you're talking about any industry, any kind of business, let alone a burgeoning industry, when you're trying to get folks to invest, knowing that you have some stability moving forward is huge. And as I've talked to potential SAF producers internationally and nationally who have expressed an interest in coming to Nebraska to come here and produce that SAF, one of the things they say is they want it to be worth their while, and they have to know that if they're going to invest here, it's going to be beneficial moving forward. And so, part of the reason that I originally brought a bill to create a state-level income tax credit for the production of SAF was because we knew we had this federal tax credit that everyone was very excited about and trying to capitalize on. But as we all know, at the federal level, things tend to pendulum back and forth. And so when you're talking about millions, billions of dollars of investment, knowing that you have some skin in the game investment from your state policymakers, who are the ones that directly represent a lot of those constituents, who I think have an even more direct line of contact to the industry, that's, I think, really helpful, because those are the folks that can really see the impact of those tax credits and, I think, maintain them. So I sit on the Revenue Committee here in Nebraska. I've been on the Revenue Committee now for 3 years, ever since I got into the Legislature. And I will tell you again, because it's what I talk about mostly, with sustainable aviation fuel, it's been a journey of education. And it's not that people here have been ever opposed to, I think, supporting SAF or the increased production of SAF, but it's been about trying to make sure they understand why it's important and what we can do at the state level to help grow that industry. One of the things at the state, too, that you always have to try to convince lawmakers about is what is your return on investment. For those of you who are from Nebraska or follow Nebraska politics, you know that right now we are living in a tight budget world, as are many states, right? I think that, when you look at state-level budgets, it's easy to say, well, why don't we cut this incentive because it might save us money in the future. What that doesn't demonstrate or reflect is what your return on investment is from that incentive. And so a lot of what I try to do at the state level is work with my fellow colleagues in the legislature to educate and try to make them understand what that return on investment looks like when it comes to jobs that you're creating in rural Nebraska, when it comes to the innovation that makes Nebraska one of the states that folks want to look to. So my income tax credit bill for the production of SAF did pass back in 2022. Wow, time flies. 2022, I think. And, the unfortunate thing, I think, is that we did put some caps on that I would not like to have seen, because I think, to truly incentivize the growth of the industry, we need to make sure that the tax credit actually is worth it. I've brought some bills since then to expand that tax credit. We continue to talk with our policymakers and our stakeholders about why that's important. And, we saw a lot of things get cut last year in our budget here in Nebraska, and I'm very proud to say that we had a lot of bipartisan support here in the legislature to keep that tax credit, because a lot of folks understood we can be the leader for a lot of that production if we truly reach out to the developers and really show them that we're trying to incentivize that. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm talking to a lot of these folks in the room, and I talk a lot, I'm sorry, the stakeholders are the ones that need to engage with our legislators, because one of the things I hear all the time from legislators at the state level is, well, why do we need this? Why do we need this tax credit, or why do we need this bill, whether it's trying to make permitting easier or what have you? And I can only talk so much about it, but when you are the folks in the room who are the experts, if you go and talk to your state level officials, wherever that might be, or your local officials, wherever that might be, that's, I think, what truly can bend an ear in a way that is impactful. And so this is my ask for you to get involved at those levels, whether it's ethanol or SAF or any other of the biofuels that we're seeing the innovation for. We need the experts to go talk to the policymakers, because without that, I don't think people really believe that it's real. So please help me.
Always a good call out to the open door policy and being willing to take that call. And your staff has done a great job as well, learning along the way. There's a lot to learn in this sector, and you guys have done very well with that. I've always appreciated on the debate floor, jumping between, insurance issues or the income tax policy, and then all of a sudden we're talking about SAF for 5 minutes, and it's Senator Dungan. It's really cool to see. So we're just going to get into the weeds just a little bit more. So there's policy, state level, federal level, but there's implementation of policy, right? You still have to work through regulatory code. You have to be able to put rules to a lot of these programs. And so, Jacki, I think we've got a couple things to talk about here. Maybe we could start with some of the regulatory pieces. We've mentioned some things with ILUC, but we've also seen some changes in modeling again for 45Z, but maybe touch on some of the plant level regulatory issues, wins or challenges we have. And then you're very involved, as you mentioned, with our standards organizations. I'd love if you could just provide us with a little bit of an update on some of the great things going on over at ASTM International, for instance.
Sure, thanks, Reid. So I think one of the things that Reid wanted me to touch on was the changes to the GREAT model that has actually expanded for the wet milling ethanol industry to have parity with the dry milling industry. This is a huge win, and it's been a long time coming, and I think that is going to greatly help us all to participate in the marketplace. The modeling is coming along, and it'll be interesting to see what happens and what ultimately ends up on the 45Z calculation, if we're going to be including any climate smart ag and the FDCIC and those sorts of things. So waiting to see what happens with that. On the specification side, I am heavily involved in ASTM, and I have held leadership positions in both DO2, which has traditionally been for gasoline, diesel, and been called the Petroleum Committee for many years. We're now just calling it the Liquid Fuels Committee, which is, I think, also a huge win, that biofuels are now being considered on the same level as our petroleum friends, which is great. We have been working at that committee to expand the standards for both ethanol and biodiesel to not only, be able to be used in transportation fuels, but to have the ability to expand the use potentially to other markets like bioproducts, which we're talking about at this particular conference. And then we also have a committee, E48, which is industrial chemicals from biomass. And all of our ethanol friends have been working hard on that committee to develop standards not only for industrial uses of ethanol, but to be able to move undenatured ethanol around the U.S., specifically to export terminals. And this will facilitate global trade of ethanol because we won't be adding denaturant at the plant. We'll be adding it potentially at the port location or being able to directly export undenatured ethanol for applications into other bioproducts that may not be for a fuel use. We also have other standards in E48 which are beneficial to the biofuels industry, specifically ethanol. We've had D3417, which is the cellulose calculation to capture D3 RINs. And not only is it now covering corn as a feedstock, but you can have corn and sorghum mixtures, as well as 100% sorghum is now covered by that standard. So that's been a huge win also for the ethanol industry. And then we've also developed standards for using ethanol in cook stoves, specifically in Africa and other places that are using stoves for indoor heating and indoor cooking to cut down on the toxic chemicals that they might have from using wood, for example. And so we've developed a standard for using ethanol in that capacity. So having these various new standards available kind of builds a bridge so that we can start looking at using ethanol potentially in other ways to develop bioproducts, for example. So I think that has been a real win for not only the biofuels industry, but for the bioproducts industry to have these standards available and be able to use them to move products in the marketplace.
Yeah, thanks for that update, Jacki. And another long-term ASTM participant once told me that ASTM, their ultimate goal is to give the industry tools to do business, right? To have a replicable product that's of high quality. And it's just, that's going to be meeting the need of that end consumer every time. So thank you for that update.
I did have one ask. I know that the senator had an ask, so I would like to throw it out there. If you have a representative that would be interested in working with these standard making committees, please send them to ASTM. The price of entry is very cheap. It's $115 a year. You can join as many committees as you want, and we're always looking for people to come and participate with us to help us build these standards for our products.
Love to have the plug of everybody coming out to ASTM, because it's truly, there's a lot of work that is market moving that happens there, and it's all about being there, being present for the conversations, being with the nerds, getting in the weeds. It's very important.
Come be with me. We love nerds.
The resident nerd on the panel. Might get in trouble for that one. We just got a couple minutes left. Jacki, you had made a mention about climate smart agriculture, or agricultural practices, and I don't know if we touched on that too much earlier, in this panel, but perhaps we could just make a mention. That's always been an effort for the industry to get credit where credit's due, right? For our farmers making innovations at the field level into our calculations for our fuels. So, Dawn, we kind of talked about this when we were on the Hill. What are some of the chatter going on with CSA, or how are things there? USDA has a rule. What's kind of our playbook on that?
Sure. Excuse me. Sure. So one of the other areas where we're waiting for clarity in 45Z and how the farming will weigh into that and at what level. But we know some certain practices have already been credited, if you will. So perhaps no-till, yet acknowledging in some areas of the country, no-till really isn't a good option. Or utilizing cover crops. Oh, but wait, in far North Dakota, it's really, really hard to utilize cover crops because it gets too cold too quick. Their growing season is too short. How you manage your fertilizer and what types of fertilizer you use. So what we ask as an industry was, yes, let's acknowledge all of those things and about a dozen other practices that farmers are utilizing today, but not bundle them. Don't require 3 or 4 things because it doesn't fit North Dakota the same as it fits Louisiana, the same as it fits Missouri. And so let's make it right for the region where it is. That's one piece of that. And again, like I said, waiting for clarity on what will actually get to be utilized, Reid. And I think farmers today, nobody wants to spend more money than they need to. Farmers want an ROI on their practices, on their inputs. They don't want to have to use as much chemical to kill pests, right? So we use seed that helps us accordingly. And what happens to that when it comes to the foreign market for SAF opportunities? And I just want to give a real quick shout out, Reid, to our state government for the support, whether it's our governor, our director of agriculture, economic development, and then our unicameral. The support for agriculture and biofuels or bioproducts in Nebraska is incredibly robust. And we are blessed to have that. And whether it's encouraging foreign markets to do business with us, just recently a trade trip to Japan that was very successful, and the fact that they are for real moving to E10 in Japan, that's a tremendous opportunity for Nebraska corn farmers and ethanol producers. Or if it's the UK coming to us regarding SAF and showing them that alcohol to jet can be a solution for them, and here's the sustainability, the cycle of how well we do things here, utilizing our resources in a really, really responsible way. So just that, yeah, there you go.
That's perfect. And I think that highlights that we're recognizing ethanol as a building block molecule to be able to do a lot of the great processes, as well as make the products that many of the hopefuls in the audience are looking to see. So we just got a couple minutes left. If you guys had any parting final thoughts for our audience, you've made the asks. So you guys have some homework. Please come find these folks. We'd be happy to cap it off unless you guys had anything else you wanted to add.
The last thing I'll say as a state legislator and as somebody who's relatively new to this arena is when you're talking about the biofuels, it presents a really incredible opportunity for cooperation. And what I mean by that is you see partnerships and work together amongst people who you don't normally expect to get together. And like I said, in the Nebraska legislature, I would echo Don's sentiment. There's been a lot of support for the biofuels industry, all the way from the executive branch to the legislative branch. And I think we have a strong history in this state of supporting that. And what's interesting about it is you have folks coming at it from all different perspectives, right? You have folks who are supportive, for example, of sustainable aviation fuel for the environmental aspects. You have people who are supportive of it because it's creating jobs in their community. You have people who are supporting it because it's, creating more innovation. And you have folks from the chamber saying this is how we grow businesses, not just in Lincoln and Omaha, our larger communities, but also in central and western Nebraska. So when you're talking about the biofuels industry, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, it's really an amazing chance to build bridges and to see cooperation amongst people that you probably don't always see that work between. And that's part of why I've really enjoyed working in this field. I'd encourage folks, again, to go back to your local communities, your state legislators, wherever, and try to build those bridges, because you can find those partnerships in a way that I think in the bigger picture we don't always see in politics. And I think this presents us a chance to work together for something that helps everybody. So it's been really exciting.
All right. On that note, I think we're going to cap it off. So please help me thank our esteemed panelists for joining us today.